Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked to St. Michael's Church, clutching a small paper bag. Inside was all I could afford, a tin of cookies and a thermos of cocoa. Christmas was never extravagant for me, but I felt a pull to visit the church, as if something or someone was waiting. Inside, the warm glow of candles reflected on empty pews. Then I saw him, an elderly man, sitting alone at the front. His shoulders were hunched, his coat frayed, and he seemed swallowed by the quiet. I hesitated, unsure if I should intrude, but something in his stillness made it impossible to walk away. "Good morning," I said softly, stepping closer. His head lifted and pale, watery eyes met mine. "Morning," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I thought you might like this." I extended the bag. "It's not much," but my voice faltered as his gaze flicked to the offering. After a long pause, he took the bag, his hands trembling. "Why?" he asked, his tone wary. I shrugged. "It's Christmas. No one should spend it alone." His lips quivered and he looked away. "I'm Edward," he said after a moment. "Rosalie." I hesitated before adding, "Well, Edward," I said, glancing around the somber interior of the church. "How about we leave this cold, drafty place and find somewhere warmer? My apartment's close by. It's not much, but it's better than this." He looked at me then, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Suspicion? Relief? I couldn't tell. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me." I hesitated, not entirely sure myself. "It's Christmas," I replied simply. "Sometimes that's all the reason we need." Edward held my gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right," he said, his voice carrying a quiet resignation. "Lead the way." The walk was slow, the cold biting at us. At my apartment, I guided Edward to the small table near my modest tree. Its mismatched ornaments glimmered under fairy lights. "This is nice," he said, almost to himself. "Here." I handed him a steaming cup of cocoa. "Drink this, it'll help." He sipped, his face softening. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I know," I replied simply. "But everyone deserves a little kindness." For a moment he was silent, then whispered, "Thank you, Rosalie." Something in his voice unsettled me. His gratitude felt deeper than mere politeness, almost as if it carried the weight of a hidden sorrow. As he stared at the tree, I couldn't help but wonder, who was this man? And why did he feel so familiar, yet so mysterious? Edward sat at my small table, the dim light from my Christmas tree casting faint shadows across his face. He cradled the cocoa cup between his frail hands, as if drawing warmth from it. I noticed his gaze drifting to the worn edges of the ornaments on my tree and the humble setting of my apartment. "It's been years since I sat by a tree like that," he said quietly, breaking the silence. I set a plate of cookies in front of him and sat across the table. "Didn't you decorate for Christmas?" I asked. He let out a hollow chuckle. "Not this year, not for a long time actually." Something in his tone pulled at me, a sadness that felt larger than just the absence of decorations. "Why not?" I asked gently. Edward's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed and looked away, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because it doesn't mean much when you've been shut out by your own family." I blinked, taken aback. "Shut out?" He nodded, his fingers tightening around the cup. "My children, they don't speak to me anymore. They think I made choices that ruined everything for them." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And maybe they're right." The confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. I leaned forward. "What happened?" Edward hesitated, his eyes flicking to the window as if searching for answers in the falling snow. "It was a long time ago," he said finally. "I made a decision that cost us a lot of money. We lost the house and their mother. She never forgave me. After she passed, the kids wanted nothing to do with me." I swallowed, unsure of what to say. The way his voice cracked on the word mother made my chest ache. "That sounds really hard." He gave me a weak smile. "Hard is one word for it." He took a deep breath. I thought maybe this Christmas they'd let me come back. I sent a letter to my eldest, hoping for, I don't know, a miracle. But when I showed up at their doorstep yesterday, they wouldn't even open the door. The image struck me like a blow. This frail old man standing in the cold, turned away by his own family. "Edward, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It is what it is," he replied, though his eyes glistened. "I don't blame them. I wasn't a perfect father, but it doesn't make the loneliness any easier." A long silence followed, broken only by the faint ticking of my clock. I felt a strange mixture of anger and sorrow. How could anyone turn their back on him? Yet his own guilt seemed to weigh even heavier than their rejection. "I'm glad you're here though," I said finally, trying to lighten the mood. "At least now you don't have to spend Christmas alone." Edward's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You're a good soul, Rosalie. Not many people would do what you did today." "Well," I said, forcing a grin, "I guess you just happened to find the right person at the right time." His smile lingered, but there was something unreadable in his expression. Something that made me wonder if there was more to his story than he was letting on. The evening settled softly, the flicker of the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. I carried 2 steaming cups of tea to the table, placing one in front of Edward, whose weary eyes tracked my movements. He sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words thick in the air. "You know," I began, settling into the chair across from him, "things haven't been easy for me either." Edward raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering across his face. "I used to work at a publishing house," I said, staring into my cup. "It was my dream job, reading manuscripts, finding hidden gems. But one day, out of the blue, they told me I wasn't a good fit anymore." "That's absurd," Edward said, his voice laced with indignation. I shrugged. "It didn't even give me a reason. Just a box for my things and a pat on the back. I tried to fight it, but the system isn't built for people like me. People without connections." The warmth of the tea did little to soothe the chill of the memory. Since then, I've been scraping by with freelance work. Editing articles, writing reviews, whatever I can find. The pay's not much, and some months I've had to dip into my savings just to cover the bills. Edward studied me intently, his hands clasped around the tea mug. "But," I added, forcing a smile, "I can't complain too much. I've got a roof over my head, food on my table. And days like today remind me that there's still good in the world." Edward leaned forward. "Rosalie, how do you stay so hopeful?" I paused, considering the question. "Because the alternative is giving up, and I've been through enough to know that giving up never gets you anywhere. Besides, it costs nothing to be kind. I've learned that sometimes even the smallest kindness can change someone's day or their life." For a moment, Edward said nothing, his gaze dropping to the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You have a strength most people could only dream of." The morning light crept through the curtains, heralding a new day. I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing a modest breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast. Edward sat quietly, his demeanor oddly subdued. As I placed the plate in front of him, he looked up with a faint smile. "You've done so much for me, Rosalie. I can't thank you enough." "It's nothing," I replied, brushing off the compliment. "You deserved a little warmth this Christmas." Edward hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he said, "I think it's time for me to move on. I've taken enough of your time." "Are you sure? You're welcome to stay as long as you like." He shook his head. "You've already given me more than I deserve." As he stood to leave, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "Take this," he said, pressing it into my hand. "What is it?" "A token of my gratitude," he replied cryptically. I unfolded the paper to find an address scribbled in neat handwriting. Before I could ask what it meant, Edward gave me a kind smile and walked out the door, disappearing into the crisp morning air. Barely 2 hours had passed since Edward's departure when a firm knock at the door startled me. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and hurried to answer, half expecting Edward to have returned. Instead, 2 impeccably dressed men stood on my doorstep, their expressions professional yet unreadable. "Miss Rosalie Evans?" one of them asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. The taller of the 2 stepped forward. "We represent Mr. Edward Hargrove." My stomach flipped. "Edward, is he all right?" The man smiled. "Quite all right, Miss Evans. In fact, he asked us to deliver a message and an offer." "An offer?" I echoed, my heart pounding. The shorter man produced a folder from his briefcase. Mr. Hargrove is not just any man. He's the head of a considerable estate, and his family, well, let's just say they don't always see eye to eye with him. He was deeply moved by your kindness and wishes to offer you a permanent position at his residence. A position as his personal assistant, the taller man clarified. The salary is substantial, and accommodations will be provided at his mansion. My breath caught in my throat. The sheer improbability of the situation left me reeling. I don't understand. Why would he do this for me? Mr. Hargrove values loyalty and compassion above all else, the shorter man said. You exemplified both when you treated him with dignity and kindness, expecting nothing in return. I stood there, speechless, as the enormity of the offer sank in. Will you accept? The taller man asked, his tone gentle. Tears welled in my eyes as I thought about Edward's parting words, the address, and the weight of his gratitude. I nodded slowly, a small smile breaking through. Yes, I said, I'll accept. The men exchanged satisfied glances before handing me the folder. As they left, I closed the door, clutching the documents tightly. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to rewrite my story, a new beginning in every sense of the word.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.